Growing up in the early 2000s as a young deer hunter, the guys on the Outdoor Channel were who you strived to be. You had the Drurys, Team Fitzgerald, Bone Collector, Roger Raglin Outdoors, and my personal favorite, Getting Close with Lee and Tiffany, which is now known as The Crush with Lee and Tiffany. It was so easy to be drawn to them. Lee seemed to be living every guy's dream. He's killing giant bucks with his smoking hot wife. It was easy to watch that show, sit back and think, man, it must be nice. But Lee was not born with a silver spoon. Growing up in Columbia Heights, Minnesota, Lee was always infatuated with whitetails.
I remember I would just sit at that window and wait for them to get home and run down there and couldn't wait to see if they had shot a deer. And if they had, I'd spend the entire next day be hanging out in the woodshed looking at that deer, and everybody just thought I was crazy, all my aunts and uncles, but as I got older, my sisters even. I remember them saying to me a number of times, "You're never gonna do anything with your life, all you think about is hunting."
Finally, at the age of 12, Lee's father would take Lee hunting. The rules were simple. You sit in your tree stand until your dad comes back to get you. Well, Lee was on a mission to get his first buck, and the rules were meant to be broken. Lee's mind worked a little bit differently, and he thought, if the deer aren't coming to me, maybe I should go to them. Lee got out of his stand, found some fresh tracks, and followed them to a buck. And that's how Lee Lakosky killed his first buck. From there, the addiction took off. Tiffany also grew up in Columbia Heights, but wasn't from a deer hunting family. Lee and Tiffany knew each other for a while before they started dating. Tiffany was friends with one of Lee's sisters, but it wasn't until college that they started dating. In 1999, Tiffany shot her first whitetail with a bow while Lee was in the tree with her, and from there, her world was totally different. Now fast forward to 2003. Lee and Tiffany are now newlyweds. Lee was working for an oil refinery as a chemical engineer, and Tiffany was a flight attendant. 2 weeks after they got married, Lee quit his job because they wouldn't give him time off to go deer hunting.
A couple weeks after we got married, I remember I was out with my mom, and he called me and he said, "Hey, you want to go out for lunch?" And I was like, "Aren't you supposed to be at work?" And he goes, "I just quit my job. Do you want to move to Iowa?" I was like, "Let's go." And we literally packed up and left that week.
Soon after, their farm in Salem, Iowa was being transformed into a deer hunting mecca.
When we first got this farm, it was the first year we moved down here. We had no tractors, nothing. We lived in the city. I knew nothing about food plots or farming or planting or anything else.
But where does the video camera come into play? Lee had always liked recording his hunts, even as a teenager, but it was always just for fun. Eventually, he and Tiffany would start filming each other, but neither of them had intentions on it turning into hosting a TV show. Lee had written for some outdoor magazines in college, where he met some pro staff of Realtree Outdoors. Shortly after their move to Iowa, Lee, still unemployed, they get a call from ScentLock about hosting a TV show. And Getting Close with Lee and Tiffany was born. Within 2 years, Getting Close with Lee and Tiffany was the #1 rated show on the Outdoor Channel. And then in 2008, to stay up with the trends of the Outdoor Channel, they relaunched as The Crush with Lee and Tiffany. Growing deer has always been Lee's drive. Let them go, let them grow, was his strategy from the beginning. Because of this program, Lee and Tiffany have always been able to capture some of the most incredible big buck footage you can find. Lee has become notorious for shooting absolute giant world-class whitetails, working towards every bow hunter's goal of killing a 200-inch buck. Finally, in 2017, Lee had an unreal season, killing 2 200-inch whitetails. The first came on October 10th on a buck that gross scored 201 inches, which was his first 200-inch deer and his biggest buck to date. In that same season, in late November, he topped his personal best with a buck grossing 206 inches. However, 2017 wasn't all sunshine and roses for the Lakosky family. Earlier that summer, after giving birth to their daughter Reagan, Tiffany was diagnosed with a form of cancer that was rare but highly treatable. Tiffany faced that cancer head on and came out of her last chemo treatment that year cancer-free.
Last week I was having chemo. This week we're on a big deal.
The very next day after hearing the news that she was cancer-free, they were headed to Utah and Tiffany killed a mule deer. Literally, 1 week after her last chemo treatment. In October of 2019, Lee topped his personal best buck yet again with a deer he called Wednesday, a 7.5-year-old 203/8-inch Iowa giant. His hot streak would continue in 2020 with Lee yet again killing his biggest buck to date with a buck he called Dagger. Dagger ended up topping the score charts at over 222 inches. So the next time you're enjoying your outdoor television thinking, man, it must be nice, use the story of the Lakoskys as motivation to fulfill your dreams, because the story of how Lee and Tiffany Lakosky became who they are is proof that with a strong work ethic, a dream, and the support of your family, anything is possible.